The probe drifted through the darkness of space for 17 years before it found something that would change everything. It was a small machine, no bigger than a car, built by human hands and launched from Earth with nothing but hope and curiosity driving its mission. When it finally reached the system, it did not find empty planets or barren rocks. It found the ruins of something that should not have existed. Admiral remembered the day the transmission came back. He was a young officer then, barely 30 years old, serving on a research station orbiting Mars. The entire station had gathered around the communication screens, watching as the images slowly formed pixel by pixel. The probe had discovered a relay station, ancient and damaged but unmistakably artificial. The technology was beyond anything humans had ever imagined, and buried within its broken computers was a secret that would haunt humanity for generations. They were not alone. They had never been alone. The galaxy was filled with life, thousands of species spread across millions of worlds, all connected by a vast political entity called the Galactic Confederation. Trade routes crossed the stars like highways. Empires rose and fell. Wars were fought and peace was made. And through all of it, for over 2,000 years, they had known about Earth. Stood now in the command center of humanity's greatest achievement, an orbital defense platform hidden in the shadow of the moon. He was 63 years old, his hair gray and his face lined with the weight of secrets he had carried for decades. On the holographic display before him, a map of the galaxy slowly rotated, showing humanity's place in the cosmos. They were located in a region marked as Sector 7 Null, a designation that meant worthless space, not worth the effort of colonization. Commander Lisa Grant stood beside him, her arms crossed as she studied the same display. She was younger than by 15 years, but her eyes held the same cold understanding that came from knowing the truth. She had been recruited into the program straight out of the academy, chosen for her brilliance and her ability to keep secrets. "The latest intelligence reports confirm what we suspected," she said. "The Confederation has no idea we've advanced this far. Their last survey of Earth was conducted 80 years ago. They still think we're burning fossil fuels and arguing about climate change." Nodded slowly, and the fleet. "On schedule. The final ships will be completed within the month. 2,000 vessels, fully armed and crewed. We've trained 3 generations of officers in secret, using simulations based on every scrap of tactical data we could pull from that relay station. 2,000 ships. It had taken 50 years of hidden work to build them. Entire industries had been created in secret, buried deep beneath the surface of the Moon and Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Millions of people had dedicated their lives to a project they could never speak about, driven by a truth that burned in every human heart. The Confederation had known about them. They had watched humanity struggle through centuries of war and suffering. They had observed the First and Second World Wars, the Cold War, the nuclear tensions that had nearly ended everything. Their scientists had written papers about human psychology. Their politicians had debated whether to make contact, and in the end, they had decided that humanity was not worth the trouble. Had read the reports himself, translated from alien languages by the dedicated teams of linguists who had spent decades decoding the data from the relay station. The Confederation had classified Earth as a failed development candidate. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to bring into the galactic community. The official recommendation was to let them destroy themselves and reclaim the system afterward. It was not hatred that drove. It was something colder and more patient. The Confederation had looked at humanity and seen animals destined for extinction. They had been so certain of their judgment that they had not bothered to check again. They had no idea that the primitive species they had dismissed was watching them, learning from them, preparing to prove them wrong. "Have the other admirals been briefed?" asked. Lisa nodded. "Admiral will command the diplomatic corps. She's been studying Confederation politics for 20 years. If anyone can talk our way into their council chambers, it's her." Admiral Price will handle intelligence operations. He's already identified 17 potential allies among the minor species who might welcome a new player in galactic politics. And the crew, do they understand what we're asking of them? Lisa was quiet for a moment. They understand. Every man and woman in this fleet volunteered knowing they might never come home. This isn't just a military operation. It's the moment humanity proves that we deserve to exist. Turned away from the display and walked to the viewport. Outside, the shipyard stretched across the lunar surface, massive structures that had been built in secret over decades of careful work. The ships themselves were marvels of engineering, combining human ingenuity with reverse-engineered alien technology. They were not copies of Confederation designs. They were something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. "I've been thinking about the reports," he said quietly. "The ones that talked about why they left us alone. They said we were too violent, too unpredictable. They said we would tear ourselves apart before we ever reached the stars." "They were wrong," Lisa said. "Were they?" Shook his head. "We've fought more wars in the last 1,000 years than some Confederation species have fought in their entire history. We've committed atrocities that would horrify any civilized being. We've come within minutes of destroying ourselves more times than I can count. But we didn't destroy ourselves, that's the point." Turned to face her. "The point is that they weren't entirely wrong about us. Humans are violent, we are unpredictable, we are dangerous. But those same qualities that made them write us off are the qualities that got us here. We don't give up. We don't accept our fate. We fight and we adapt and we survive." He looked back at the shipyards, at the fleet that represented everything humanity had sacrificed to reach this moment. In 30 days, those ships would launch into the unknown. They would make contact with a civilization that had ignored them for. They would demand a place at the table that had been to them. "Send word to the fleet commanders," said. "Final preparations begin immediately. In 30 days we launch." Lisa saluted and turned to leave, but's voice stopped her at the door. "Lisa, when we get out there, when we face them for the first time, I want you to remember something. They had 2,000 years to help us. 2,000 years to guide us, to teach us, to welcome us into their community. They chose to let us die instead. Whatever happens next, whatever we have to do to earn our place in this galaxy, we didn't start this. They did." Lisa nodded once and left the room, remained at the viewport, watching the ships that would carry humanity's hopes into the stars. The galaxy had ignored Earth for too long. That was about to change. The trade station had existed at the edge of Confederation space for over 600 years. It was a massive structure, shaped like a wheel spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars, home to nearly 50,000 beings from dozens of different species. Ships came and went at all hours, carrying goods and passengers between the worlds of the inner territories. Nothing exciting ever happened here. Nothing unexpected ever occurred. Station commander had held his position for 32 years. He was a tall and thin, with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated face. His species was known for their patience and their talent for administration. They were not known for handling surprises well. The first sign that something was wrong came from the sensor technician, a young named who had been assigned to the night shift. He stared at his console for a full minute before he spoke, certain that the readings must be wrong. "Commander, we have contacts emerging from faster-than-light travel. Multiple contacts." Looked up from the trade reports he had been reviewing. "How many ships? Which convoy is arriving early?" "It's not a convoy, sir." Armored fingers moved across the console, trying to refine the sensor data. "I'm counting hundreds of vessels. No, wait, over 1,000. They're still arriving." Rose from his chair and crossed to the sensor station. The display showed a cloud of contact points spreading across the sector, more ships than the station had seen in its entire history arriving at once. The designs were unfamiliar, sleek and angular in ways that matched no known species in the Confederation database. 2,000 ships, whispered. They've stopped arriving. 2,000 vessels holding formation at the edge of our sensor range. That's impossible. Felt his secondary hearts begin to beat faster. There are no spacefaring civilizations in that direction. The nearest inhabited system is Sector 7 Null, and that's just a primitive world with no space capability. Sir, they're hailing us. The Maine flickered to life and found himself looking at a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had only two eyes, both facing forward like a predator. Its skin was a pinkish tone, and its mouth was curved upward in a display that the Universal Translator flagged as potentially aggressive. The being wore a uniform of dark blue with gold markings, and it sat in a command chair surrounded by others of its kind. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Navy," the creature said. "We request permission to dock and establish diplomatic relations with the Galactic Confederation." Struggled to find words. In 32 years, he had never faced a situation like this. The protocols were clear about first contact scenarios, but they assumed gradual discovery and careful introduction. They did not account for 2,000 warships appearing without warning. "I am Station Commander," he managed to say. "Your species is not registered in our database. You have no standing to request diplomatic relations. There are procedures that must be followed, councils that must be consulted." "Then I suggest you start consulting them." The human's expression did not change. "We've been watching your confederation for 50 years. We know your languages, your politics, your history. Earth is done being ignored." 50 years, felt a chill run through his body. "That's not possible. Our last survey of your system showed a pre-civilization." "Your last survey was 80 years ago. A lot has changed." The human leaned forward slightly. "We found your relay station in the system. We decoded your records. We know everything, Commander. We know that your confederation watched us for 2,000 years and decided we weren't worth helping. We know that your scientists predicted we would destroy ourselves. We know that you planned to colonize our system after we were gone." Had no response to that. The records the humans spoke of were classified at the highest levels. If they had truly decoded them, they knew things that most Confederation citizens would never learn. "You have 72 hours to arrange a meeting with your governing council," the human continued. "Earth is requesting formal membership in the Galactic Confederation, with all rights and responsibilities that implies. If we don't receive a response, we'll find someone else to talk to." The transmission ended. Stood frozen before the blank screen, his mind racing through possibilities and finding none of them acceptable. 2,000 ships crewed by a species that should not exist waited outside his station, demanding things that no one had ever demanded before. "Get me a priority channel to the High Council," he ordered. "Encryption level maximum. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate attention." The next hours were chaos. Communications flew between the station and a dozen different government bodies. Analysts scrambled to verify the sensor data. Intelligence officers dug through archives looking for any mention of the species called humans. What they found was disturbing. The reports confirmed everything the human admiral had said. Earth had been surveyed multiple times over the past 2. Each report had concluded that the native species was too aggressive and unstable for integration. The recommendation had always been the same: wait for them to destroy themselves and move in afterward. But the reports had stopped 80 years ago. Budget cuts, some analyst had noted. Sector 7 Null wasn't a priority. There was nothing there worth monitoring. Read the last report with growing horror. It described a species capable of incredible violence, but also incredible creativity. It noted their rapid technological advancement and their tendency to solve problems in unexpected ways. The analyst had added a personal observation at the end, something that was technically against protocol. "If this species survives their current crisis period, they may prove more adaptable than our models predict. Recommend continued observation at minimum. They bear watching. No one had watched. No one had cared. And now 2,000 human warships sat outside the station, demanding answers that the Confederation was not prepared to give. When the response finally came from the High Council, it was not what it hoped for. The humans would be granted an audience, but only because refusing might provoke the very conflict that everyone wanted to avoid. A diplomatic team would be assembled. Arrangements would be made. Transmitted the acceptance to the human fleet and watched as their ships began to move. They did not dock at the station. Instead, they took up positions around it, a silent reminder of the power they represented. For the first time in 600 years, the trade station was not the safest place in the sector. It was surrounded by predators who had been written off as extinct before they were ever given a chance to prove themselves. Watched the human ships on his display and wondered what else the Confederation had gotten wrong. The Hall of 10,000 Voices was the largest enclosed space ever constructed by any species in the Galactic Confederation. It sat at the heart of the capital world, a dome of crystal and light that could hold representatives from every member species at once. The acoustics had been designed by the finest engineers of a dozen worlds, allowing even a whisper to be heard from one end to the other. Today, the whispers were about the visitors who had demanded entry. High Counselor of the Dominion presided over the emergency session from her elevated platform at the center of the chamber. She was old even by her species' long-lived standards. Her skin faded to a pale gray and her 4 eyes clouded with age. But her mind remained sharp, and she understood the danger of the moment better than most. The 12 founding species sat in their traditional positions around her, their representatives chosen from the most powerful families and factions of their respective civilizations. The Empire was represented by a massive warrior whose armored body bore the scars of countless battles. The collective had sent their eldest mind speaker, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. The others were equally impressive, beings who had shaped galactic politics for thousands of years. The humans are demanding full membership, announced, her voice carrying through the vast space without amplification. They claim equal standing with all member species, including voting rights on this council. Slammed one of his armored fists against the ancient stone of his seat. Impossible. They are primitives. Our ancestors wisely chose to leave them to their fate. We should honor that wisdom by driving them back to their worthless corner of the galaxy. With what fleet? Asked the mind speaker, its voice echoing strangely through the translation system. Our military forces are spread across 1,000 sectors. It would take months to assemble enough ships to challenge them, and by then they could cause untold damage. You speak as if conflict is inevitable, said. Perhaps there is another way. There is no other way with creatures like these. Pulled up a holographic display showing scenes from human history. Wars and atrocities flickered past, images of suffering and destruction that made several of the representatives turn away. They slaughter each other over differences in skin pigmentation. They destroy their own world for temporary profit. They invented weapons capable of ending all life on their planet and came within moments of using them. These are not beings we can trust with the responsibilities of Confederation membership. And yet they are here, said quietly. Despite everything we predicted, despite every model that said they would destroy themselves, they are here. That alone should give us pause. The debate continued for hours. Some representatives argued for acceptance, pointing out that humanity's aggressive nature might make them valuable allies in conflicts to come. Others insisted on rejection, certain that allowing such a violent species into the Confederation would destabilize everything they had built. A few suggested compromise positions, limited membership with restrictions and oversight. No one noticed when the doors at the far end of the chamber opened. The 5 humans walked in without escort, their footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that fell over the hall. They were small compared to most of the species present, soft-bodied and fragile-looking. but they moved with a confidence that did not match their apparent weakness, crossing the vast floor as if they owned it. At their head was a woman with dark hair pulled back from her face and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple uniform without decoration, and she carried no visible weapons. When she reached the center of the chamber, she stopped and looked up at High Counselor without any sign of fear or hesitation. "I am Ambassador," she said. "I speak for Earth and all human territories." Raised one thin hand to silence the murmurs spreading through the chamber. "You are not invited to enter these halls. This session is closed to non-members." "Then open it." His voice was calm and clear. "Your confederation has existed for 11,000 years. You've uplifted 37 species, integrated 12,000 more, and built an empire spanning half the galaxy. We've studied your history thoroughly. We know what you're capable of." "Then you know we don't respond well to threats," growled. "I'm not here to threaten anyone," reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal, placing it on the podium before her. "This contains our complete historical database. Every war we've fought, every crime we've committed, every achievement we've accomplished. We're not hiding what we are." She began to walk slowly around the center of the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. "You've been debating whether to accept us based on records that are 80 years out of date. You've been judging us by the worst moments of our past without considering how far we've come. So let me tell you who we are now." The crystal activated, projecting images into the air above the chamber. They showed cities gleaming with clean energy, ships being constructed in orbital facilities, children learning in schools that spanned continents. They showed humans of every shade and background working together, building together, dreaming together. 50 years ago, we discovered that we weren't alone in the universe. We found your relay station and decoded your records. We learned that you had been watching us for 2,000 years and decided we weren't worth saving. That knowledge could have destroyed us. It could have proven everything your analysts believed about our species. The images shifted, showing the construction of the fleet, the training of crews, the development of new technologies. Instead, it united us. For the first time in our history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. We would reach the stars. We would find the civilizations that had abandoned us, and we would prove that they were wrong. Stopped in front of looking up at the massive warrior without flinching. "You think we're dangerous because we fight. You're right. We are dangerous, but the most dangerous thing about us isn't our violence. It's our refusal to accept limits that others place on us." She turned back to, "You have two choices. Accept us as equal members of your confederation and gain a species that will fight beside you, create beside you, and push you to be better than you've been. Or reject us and make enemies of the only beings in this galaxy who reached the stars despite everyone telling them it was impossible." The silence stretched on. Stood alone in the center of the most powerful gathering in the galaxy, surrounded by beings who could crush her without effort. She did not waver. She did not blink. "You have 1 week to decide," she said. "Choose wisely." She turned and walked back toward the doors, her small delegation falling in behind her. The representatives watched them go, some with anger, some with fear, and some with something that might have been respect. When the doors closed behind them, the chamber erupted into chaos. But High Counselor sat quietly, her ancient eyes fixed on the spot where the human ambassador had stood. In 11,000 years, no one had ever spoken to the council that way. No one had ever dared. Perhaps, she thought, that was exactly what they needed. The vote came after 3 days of debate that nearly tore the council apart. 7 species voted to accept humanity's application for membership. 5, led by the Empire, demanded their rejection and permanent quarantine. High Counselor cast the deciding vote for a compromise that pleased no one but prevented immediate disaster. Humanity would be granted provisional status. Full membership would depend on proving their worth to the Confederation through a test of the Council's choosing. If they passed, they would be welcomed as equals. If they failed, they would return to their corner of the galaxy and never bother the civilized species again. The test was designed to be impossible. Admiral received the news aboard his flagship, the USS Horizon. He stood on the bridge surrounded by officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment, reading the terms of the Council's challenge on a holographic display that glowed blue in the dim light. "The swarm," he said quietly. "They want us to deal with the swarm." Commander Lisa Grant pulled up the tactical files they had gathered over the years. The images showed creatures that looked like nightmares given form, massive biological ships that moved through space like predators hunting prey. They had no technology in the traditional sense. They were technology, living machines bred for destruction. "The swarm has been raiding the outer reaches for over a century," Lisa said. "They attack shipping lanes, devour colonies, and disappear before any fleet can respond. The Confederation has sent over 300 ships against them in the last decade. None of them came back." "What makes them so dangerous?" "Adaptation." Lisa expanded the display to show the records of previous battles. Every weapon used against them gets analyzed and countered within hours. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological agents, radiation. Nothing works for long. They learn too fast. Studied the images in silence. They were unlike anything he had ever faced, but he had not spent 50 years preparing for this moment by accepting that anything was truly impossible. Somewhere in all the data they had gathered, there had to be an answer. "What do we know about their origins?" he asked. Lisa hesitated. "That information is classified at the highest levels. The Confederation claims they're a natural phenomenon, evolved predators that developed independently. But there are rumors of something else." "What kind of rumors?" "That they aren't natural at all. That they were created as weapons by a species that died out millions of years ago. The Confederation supposedly has research archives from that civilization, but access is restricted to the founding species only." Turned to face his intelligence officer, a young man named Daniel Cole who had spent his career finding information that others wanted to keep hidden. "Danny, I need everything you can find on this creators. Official records, classified files, archaeological surveys, anything that mentions the species that made them." Daniel nodded and left the bridge, returned his attention to the tactical display, running simulations in his mind. If there were engineered weapons, they might have weaknesses built into them, that their creators had installed in case they ever needed to shut them down. Finding those weaknesses would be like searching for a needle in a haystack the size of a galaxy, but it was the only approach that made sense. 3 weeks later, Daniel returned with a data crystal that had cost the lives of 2 agents and nearly sparked a diplomatic incident with the collective. The information it contained changed everything. They had indeed been created as biological weapons by a species called the, who had vanished from the galaxy over 4 million years ago. They had been at war with nearly every other civilization of their era, and they were their ultimate weapon, self-replicating engines of destruction designed to consume everything in their path. But they had not been fools. They had built into their creations a signal encoded into this genetic memory that would force them to return to their point of origin and enter hibernation. The signal had been lost when the civilization collapsed, but fragments of the research had survived in ruins scattered across 100 dead worlds. Human scientists had been working on decoding those fragments for decades, ever since the first explorers had stumbled across an archive site. They had called it the Prometheus Initiative, a theoretical project that no one had ever expected to actually use. "Can we build the transmitter?" asked. "We can build a network of them," Lisa replied. "Deploy them across the affected sectors, activate them simultaneously, and broadcast the shutdown signal at frequencies they can't ignore. In theory, every swarm creature in range should stop what they're doing and head for the nearest dormant colony site. In theory, we've never tested it at full scale. There's no way to know if it will actually work until we try. Looked around the bridge at the officers who had followed him across the galaxy. They were young, most of them, born after the discovery that had changed everything. They had grown up knowing that humanity was alone in a universe that didn't care about them. They had trained their entire lives for the chance to prove that they deserved better. "Deploy the fleet," he ordered. "We're going to the outer reaches." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 6 hours. The human fleet arrived in the affected sector and immediately began deploying the transmitter network. They responded as expected, swarming toward the new arrivals with the mindless hunger that had destroyed so many ships before them. For a moment, it seemed like the trap had failed, like humanity had made the same mistake that every other species had made. Then gave the order to activate the network. The signal spread outward at the speed of light, carrying frequencies that had not been heard in 4 million years. They stopped moving. Their biological engines went silent. Their weapons powered down. And then, slowly, they began to drift toward a barren moon at the edge of the sector, drawn by instincts they could not resist. The crews of the human fleet watched in amazement as the creatures that had terrorized the outer reaches for generations burrowed into the rock and fell into a sleep that would last for. The swarm that had destroyed 300 Confederation ships was neutralized without a single shot being fired. Stood on the bridge of the horizon as the reports came in from across the sector. Every in range had responded to the signal. The shipping lanes were clear. The colonies were safe. Humanity had passed the test. "Send a message to the Council," he said. "Tell them we're ready to discuss the terms of our membership." Lisa smiled for the first time since they had left Earth. They're not going to know what hit them. That's the idea. Looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that had ignored humanity for so long. They wanted to know if we could solve problems. Now they know. The question is whether they're ready for what comes next. The ceremony admitting humanity to the Galactic Confederation was broadcast to every inhabited world in known space. Trillions of beings from thousands of species watched as the small delegation from Earth entered the Hall of 10,000 Voices for the second time, walking the same path they had walked weeks before when they had delivered their ultimatum to the Council. This time, the hall was filled with representatives from every member species. They lined the walls and filled the galleries, their eyes fixed on the creatures who had done what no one else could do. The swarm had been a threat for over a century, a problem that the greatest military minds in the galaxy had declared unsolvable. The humans had solved it in less than 2 months. Ambassador walked at the head of the delegation, her back straight and her expression calm. Behind her came Admiral in his dress uniform, flanked by the commanders who had led the fleet to victory. They moved through the crowd without hesitation, ignoring the whispers that followed them like shadows. High Counselor waited at the center of the chamber, holding the ceremonial seal that would mark humanity's acceptance into the Confederation. She had opposed the test when it was proposed, knowing that it was designed to humiliate and destroy rather than to evaluate. Now she was grateful that she had been overruled. The humans had proven something that the galaxy needed to see. The Galactic Confederation recognizes the United Earth government as a sovereign member state, announced, her voice carrying through the vast space. With all rights and responsibilities that status implies, may this union bring prosperity to all species under our care. Stepped forward and accepted the seal, feeling the weight of it in her hands. It was a small object, barely larger than her palm, but it represented everything humanity had worked for since the day they learned they were not alone. She turned to face the assembled representatives, holding the seal where everyone could see it. "On behalf of Earth and all human territories, I accept this honor," she said. "We look forward to contributing to the Confederation as full and equal partners." The applause that followed was polite rather than enthusiastic. Many of the species present still harbored doubts about the wisdom of admitting such a violent and unpredictable species to their ranks. But the rules were clear. Humanity had passed the test. They were members now, whether anyone liked it or not. The official ceremony was followed by hours of diplomatic functions, introductions, and negotiations that blurred together into an exhausting parade of alien faces and unfamiliar customs. By the time the human delegation finally retreated to their private chambers, felt like she had lived through a year rather than a day. Was waiting for her when she arrived, standing by the viewport and staring out at the capital city spread below them. Lights stretched to the horizon in every direction, the accumulated wealth and power of 11,000 years of civilization. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, knowing how much suffering had been caused by those who called this place home. "They are already filing protests," said Price, their intelligence officer, looking up from his. "They're claiming we cheated by using alien technology instead of military force to defeat the—" "The test was to solve the problem," replied, sinking into a chair. "No one said anything about how we had to solve it. That's what worries them." Turned away from the viewport to face the room. "They expected us to throw ships at the swarm until we ran out. They wanted to watch us fail the same way everyone else had failed. When we found another solution, we proved something they weren't ready to accept. That we're clever. That we're different." Sat down across from his, expression thoughtful. "Every species in this confederation follows the same basic patterns. They develop, they discover faster than light travel, they join the community, they fall into line. They think the way everyone else thinks. They fight wars the way wars have always been fought. And we don't." "No, we don't," leaned back in his chair. "Humanity spent our entire existence believing we were alone in the universe. We had no examples to follow, no templates to copy, no rules except the ones we made for ourselves. Everything we achieved by finding our own path." Nodded slowly, understanding what he was trying to say. "The Confederation has 12,000 member species, but they've been doing things the same way for 11,000 years. Same political structures, same military tactics, same solutions to the same problems. They're not bad at what they do, but they've stopped innovating. They got comfortable," added. "When you're the biggest fish in the pond, you don't have to adapt anymore. You just keep doing what's always worked. Until something new comes along." Smiled, the expression of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for a challenge that had never come. "The galaxy ignored us because they thought we weren't worth their attention. They left us alone because they assumed we would destroy ourselves. Instead, we did something they never expected. We survived." He stood and walked back to the viewport, looking out at the alien city. "Now they have to deal with us. A species that solved problems they couldn't solve, that reached the stars without their help, that refused to accept the role they assigned to us. We're not going to fit into their system. We're going to change it." Joined him at the viewport, standing close enough to see her reflection in the glass. Behind her, the seal of Confederation membership sat on the table, a symbol of everything they had achieved. "The council members don't understand what they've done. They think they're absorbing us into their civilization, turning us into another member species that follows their rules and accepts their traditions. They'll figure it out eventually." Put his hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of affection from a man who had spent decades hiding his emotions behind duty and discipline. "Humanity didn't come all this way just to become another cog in their machine. We came to change the galaxy, starting now." Outside the viewport, the stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. For 300 years, humanity had looked up at those lights and wondered what was out there. They had dreamed of contact, of meeting other species, of joining a community that stretched across the cosmos. Now they knew the truth. The community existed, but it was flawed. The other species were real, but they were limited in ways that humanity was not. The galaxy had ignored Earth because they thought humans were too dangerous to trust. They had been right about the danger, but wrong about everything else. Humanity was not a threat to be contained. They were a force to be reckoned with, a species that had learned to thrive in the darkness between the stars without any help from the civilizations that could have made their journey easier. The rules that had governed interstellar politics for 11,000 years were about to face something unprecedented. A species that did not know those rules had ever existed. A culture that solved problems in ways no one else had imagined. A civilization that refused to accept limits placed on it by others. Watched the lights of the capital city and thought about the future. Somewhere out there, the other species were celebrating or mourning, or simply wondering what humanity's admission would mean for their carefully ordered universe. They would find out soon enough. The galaxy would never be the same, and that thought was exactly the point. Squeezed his hand once, then turned back to the work that awaited them. Treaties to negotiate, alliances to build, and 1,000 small battles to fight before humanity's place in the stars was truly secure. It would take years, perhaps decades, to achieve everything they had dreamed of. But they had time. For the first time in human history, they had all the time in the universe, and they intended to use every moment of it.